Welcome everyone to this afternoon's webinar. We are joined today by Ed Gilliland, who is the Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives with the Interstate Renewable Energy Council, and Mackenzie Love, Senior Program Manager for Communities at the Great Plains Institute. Ed will be kicking off the webinar by discussing the Charging Smart project and the various technical assistance offered to support local governments with equitable EV charging infrastructure build out. We'll then hear from Mackenzie, who'll share a little bit about how Minnesota has supported the Charging Smart program to partner with local governments and communities to enable EV charging infrastructure deployment in the state of Minnesota. Then we'll leave some time for Q&A before we wrap up. But I will hand it over to Ed to get us started.
Okay. Thank you so much, Delaney. I've got my screen up. Hopefully you guys can see it.
Looks good. Yep.
Okay, great. So good afternoon. And I am Ed Gilliland. I also at the Interstate Renewable Energy Council, and I run the Charging Smart program. I've been at IREC and the Solar Foundation since 2015. And of course, we merged with IREC a few years ago, and so still at it, and so happy to talk to you about Charging Smart. It is so here is our contact information. I'm also, of course, as Delaney said, joined by Mackenzie at the Great Plains Institute, and we're going to just talk about what Charging Smart is, and then I'm going to do a little bit of discussion on sort of our planning and zoning guidance, and then jump back into the Charging Smart program, and then Mackenzie will wrap it up with the state sponsored program in Minnesota. IREC, we build the foundation for the rapid adoption of clean energy efficiency to benefit the people, the economy, and our planet. We are a nonprofit 501c3. And we focus in three areas primarily: workforce development, regulatory engagement, where we work on interconnection, primarily an interconnection to the distribution grid, and then the area that I'm in and the Charging Smart in, which is local clean energy solutions. And that includes a number of programs, not only Charging Smart, but also Soul Smart. And soon to be now launched Distributed Wind Smart. So this is the umbrella brand that we've just developed with the Department of Energy and the International City County Managers Association. And for these three programs, to group them together and make it help build the synergies among the three programs. So many of you may have heard of the Soul Smart. It's been around since 2016, and Charging Smart is newer. We'll talk about in a minute, and Distributed Wind Smart is to be launched. So what is Charging Smart? It's a national technical assistance and designation and recognition program for local governments to support the adoption of electric vehicles, and especially EV charger deployment. And as I said, it was modeled after the Soul Smart program, which currently has over 500 local jurisdictions, that's city, counties, and regional organizations that have been designated through Soul Smart. So we are a little bit of history here. Of course, as I said, Soul Smart was launched by IREC and ICMA and other partners, including Great Plains, back in 2016. And then we started working with the Great Plains Institute, started working on pilots in Charging Smart in Minnesota, Michigan, Ohio. The Chicago Area Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus also began piloting their EV readiness program in Northern Illinois. And so we have started piloting these programs in various states starting in 2023 and continued into 2024, where we launched the program in 7 other regions. And along the way, we also developed a sustainable energy publication on planning and zoning guidance for EV charging deployment. And I want to talk a little bit about that because it has a lot of influence or bearing on this program and how we work it. So we have lots of partners, of course, besides Great Plains, who's been sort of a lead partner from the beginning. We have Fourth Mobility, ICMA, NARC, National Association of Regional Councils, RMI, and as I mentioned, the Mayor's Caucus. We also have a host of clean cities coalitions from around the country that are focused more specific geographically. So a strong group of partners. We also have involvement by industry, including the major charging companies such as EVgo, Tesla, and ChargePoint, and then Edison Electric Institute, which represents utilities. So they have been instrumental in helping guide us in developing the criteria that we use to evaluate local governments to achieve, as they work to achieve Charging Smart designation. So what is the opportunity here? Well, we are launching nationally. So any and everybody that is interested in local government in your area, we can serve them through Charging Smart. It is an opportunity to help communities in your state facilitate EV charging. And I want to note here, we especially are set up to address permitting barriers and to reduce cost and increase the number of EVs and charging stations in your community. So Charging Smart has 6 main areas of focus. So you see here, planning, regulation, utility engagement, education and outreach, government operations, and shared mobility. So we really try to be a comprehensive focus on everything that a local government can do to improve the environment for the growth of electrical vehicles and EV charging. We do, from these 6 categories, we have 145 specific actions that a community can take. And so that's about 20 to 30 for each of the categories. Although regulation, I think we have about 35 actions. And as I said, we put a lot of attention on planning and regulation because it is so essential to successful growth of EVs and EV charging. So I'm going to step back, and I also want to add that we have overlaid on all of this, we have our equity program we call EVs for All. And so we work with the local governments to help them ensure that the more disadvantaged areas of the communities aren't left behind. So I'm going to step back a little bit and talk about our guidance that we put together and that we completed last year. And it is, again, it is a foundation, provides a foundation for our regulatory actions, which are so important for the success of local charging. We, look at the big picture here. Here's all the things that local governments or local actors can do to facilitate EVs and EV charging. There's all sorts of education and outreach, local policies, clean fleets. And then over on the right, you're looking at the sort of the utility interconnection side of things, which is also an opportunity and a barrier for EV charging. And then in the middle here, we're talking about local regulatory approval. So I'm going to jump to the next slide and let's focus on that center part, because we've done a lot of research on this in putting together our guidance document. And one of the things we found early on, and we did this through stakeholder groups that, including the EV charging companies, but a lot of the input they were giving us was that if you look at the building and electrical codes that most people associate with permitting, that is not the primary barrier to getting regulatory approval at the local level. It is a barrier sometimes, and we do want to address that. But what we were hearing is that planning and zoning review was a more significant barrier that could delay projects for long periods of time, weeks and months and months. And also another barrier is the approval process itself. You know, what are the steps that the local jurisdiction goes through to get permitted? So that is the real focus of this guidance document is on these orange bubbles here. And as a result, we came out with this guidance document. We did it with RMI and under the Sustainable Energy Action Committee. That was very a stakeholder-driven process. And this is the sort of the meat of that document, which covers a lot of categories that deal with regulatory approval and planning, zoning, parking, which can be a part of the zoning, but we separated out parking because it is such a significant barrier. There's design, and then we do have a section on street charging, and then we cover the approval process. So I'm going to take a few minutes just to give you a sneak preview of some of the sort of planning and zoning aspects that we addressed. And this is only a trailer sort of, so we just want to but give you an idea of some of the recommendations. Of course, it's very important to address EV charging in comprehensive plans, zoning codes, design guidelines, and supporting plans. So if a locality does not address these things in their documents, then invariably they're going to get an application for EV charging, and they're just going to throw up their hands and say, what do we do? Let's send it through public hearings. Let's send it to the zoning commission. Let's just, and this can go on for weeks and weeks or months and months. Certainly, there's really important to collaborate with regional planning organizations and utilities. Look at the existing and proposed locations for public charging and project charger demand by use case. We did see one of the things we did is we brought RMI onto the team for Charging Smart, and they've actually developed a tool, a modeling tool that can, in fact, do exactly this. So this is, they can project charger demand by use case by sub area. Another thing we looked a lot at is zoning and use designation. And here, again, we want to address EV charging and zoning codes, allow accessory use EV charging by right in all zones, avoid discretionary reviews. So again, we're trying to avoid the type of reviews where the charging application has to go through zoning commission, planning commission, city council, public hearings. It's, these are the things we try to avoid. Sometimes a charging is not an accessory use. Sometimes it's a primary use, like a charging hub. So then the real best practice is to define it as its own use, not assume that it's the same thing as a gasoline fueling station, which is subject to more stringent environmental review. So important to consider both accessory and primary use EV charging. And of course, this all typically leads to updating the zoning codes. So if you don't want to read the guidance, but want a little more in-depth knowledge about this discussion, Mackenzie and I did do a webinar for the American Planning Association, and that is available on YouTube. So we're going to go back to the Charging Smart program and now talk a little bit more about how you get designated under Charging Smart and what that process is. So we have 3 levels of designation: bronze, silver, and gold, and each of them have progressively more actions that a locality has to achieve and complete in order to get recognized for those categories, for that category. So I'm going to talk about starting out with bronze. So a locality would need to get 80 total general points. And in addition, EVs for all points, they'd have to have 15 of those. So really 95 total points. And the 80 points would need to include some specific required criteria or actions. So we don't, for bronze, require that a locality make changes to their zoning, but we do require that they review the zoning and identify potential barriers or restrictions. We would expect them to adopt a standard permit application process and a permitting checklist and put those online, and then just simply meet with the utilities and discuss collaboration opportunities. So those are the requirements for bronze. Then they would need to get points in a category, the planning category, 10 points there, 15 points from education and incentives. And then just like college electives, you get 20 points from any of the categories. So most all of these actions are from 5 to 20 points. And this is an example of how you would accumulate points to get bronze designation. So silver, we do expect there to be some best practices incorporated into the zoning ordinance. And so you see here the R1.1 and R2.8 are going to be specific actions that likely will have to be written into the zoning code. And so if they're not already there, then the locality would need to enact some kind of zoning amendment. So permitted chargers and accessory use to parking lots in all zoning districts by right. We just talked about that briefly before. And then allow EV parking to count towards minimum parking requirements. And then do complete a fleet analysis. So that's the requirements for silver. We still have more total points, more EVs for all points, and we want 20 points from utility engagement actions, and then you get some electives again, 40 points from other sources. And all of these are progressive. So in order to qualify for gold, you're going to need to have the bronze completed, or that have all of the requirements of bronze completed, all the requirements of silver completed. And now for gold, you need 300 total points, 60 in addition, 60 points from EVs for all, and then a host of other requirements, such as install a public charger, purchase EVs for fleet use. And there are a lot of electives here. You've got 115 points you can draw from any place. So I mentioned the EVs for all. What is that? So the way we've structured that is that any of the 145 criteria are eligible for EVs for all. So if you select a criteria and you in an action and you acknowledge awareness of barriers and communicate inclusivity, you would get 5 points for EVs for all. And then if you went up to 20 points where you take direct action and incorporate accountability. So lots of opportunities for EVs for all. Now, we do recognize that of the 145 criteria, some are going to be more conducive to EVs for all. And so we provide examples of the ways you can get EVs for all points for select criteria. So that to help that process, so that the community isn't just guessing like, well, how do we do this? So we do give a lot of guidance. And in fact, all of these criteria, we give a significant amount of guidance on. It's no cost technical assistance. We work with them to go through and do the actions. They need information related to actions. We have that. We have that all in a program guide, and we can do additional research and support. So it is a very hands-on program where we will work with the locality to help them improve their practices. So I'm going to stop here and turn it over to Mackenzie. Mackenzie does have to leave at 45 after the hour, so but that should be plenty of time to hear her presentation and for her to answer questions. I can stay on longer.
Right, great. Thanks, Ed. Let me get my slides going here. Could you let me know if you can see those?
Looks
Yes.
good.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Mackenzie Love from the Great Plains Institute, or GPI, as we like to use a little bit of shorthand. A little bit of background on us. We're a nonprofit that's dedicated to decarbonization across all sectors. And that's a pretty large umbrella. So the team that I'm a part of within that focuses on the types of organizations that we see as leading that work on a day-to-day basis, which is, of course, communities. And we aim to make the lessons learned and best practices that we find in working with communities both scalable and replicable as we expand the footprint of our work. And that's why it made such great sense for us to become involved with, and why we're so proud to be a lead partner of Charging Smart along with IREC. GPI has been involved in Charging Smart since its earliest days, and we are very proud to continue that partnership. For my remarks today, I'll give you a bit of an introduction to how we've been working with a state-led entity to advance Charging Smart, being the Minnesota Department of Transportation. Share a little bit of history of how GPI has been working with the program, and then move into the strategies that we use to engage communities directly, and then leave time for some question and answers at the end. This is our vision and mission statement. I know I'm leaving it out for just a moment, but if anyone has questions offline, I'd be happy to talk about that more, but I want to focus in on the primary content for today, which is Charging Smart. So as I mentioned earlier, GPI has been involved with this program since its earliest days, and we even started before that, putting out our first kind of EV readiness principles in 2017. And that really inspired us to work more towards engaging with the communities in a recurring and regular fashion. And we expanded on that work in the next year, starting to engage folks through cohort approach. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in a couple of slides. But here I wanted to highlight that by 2022, we had already been working with IREC to implement EV Smart, which is a cohort-based program that became the development phase for Charging Smart. And within 2 years, we had worked with a series of communities, and several of them actually earned the first Charging Smart designations in the country. So that was a really exciting development early this year. And now we're working with a larger group that covers the entirety of the Midwest, and are proud to partner with IREC as to continue to implement the program as it begins to expand nationwide. So a big part of our work here, a big part of the foundation of it, was supported by the Minnesota Department of Transportation. In 2022, they actually awarded GPI a grant through their Clean Transportation Pilot Program for $120,000. And that enabled us to really get going on this cohort-based approach to providing technical assistance to communities. And we were able to engage 30 different groups from across the entirety of the state, which was really important to include both the metro areas and the greater Minnesota, and work with communities in kind of an urban setting, and also rural and exurban parts of the state. And we were able to work with them for about 1 calendar year. And this led to some of them being recognized as national leaders through the Charging Smart program in transportation electrification generally. We're very grateful to have the MnDOT's financial support, because it not only helped us work with those communities, but also helped lay the groundwork for building the foundation of Charging Smart, which is now available across the country. But the impact of that state level involvement didn't stop with the funding. And this is something that we found very important, was the relationship aspect of working with an organization like the DOT. Of course, having their engagement facilitated us reaching out to new communities as we recruited folks to join the Charging Smart program. It was really helpful to say, we have the support of, we're in partnership with the Minnesota Department of Transportation, because that creates kind of a foundation of trust and a space to move forward with a respected entity that everyone knows across the entirety of the region. So that was very helpful. Their support also facilitated us reaching out and seeking new funding to advance this work and continue it into the future, which is something that communities have expressed to us is very important. Not having a kind of just a point in time engagement, but the ability to continue to work on the problems that they're facing with a trusted partner over some period of time has been a key aspect of their interest in Charging Smart and having the state work with us on this program and help us leverage their support into new funding makes that case for their involvement that much stronger. And when we did get to the point of celebrating some of the communities, Ed mentioned that Charging Smart focuses on providing recognition to those groups that are doing a really great job with transportation electrification. Having representatives of the state at our celebration events was a really empowering thing for the communities to see. On the side of my screen here, you'll see Deputy Commissioner Jean Wallace of the Department of Transportation celebrating those communities and all of the success that they had made, which continues to show a comprehensive and supportive environment for the communities engaged in the program. So we really valued the state's engagement every way and every aspect, and we found it was beneficial to both to our communities, to us, and to the state, because they had the awareness of what was going on across the communities and could see any challenges that were coming up so that they could be prepared in doing pass-through funding or new programming with the understanding of what communities were experiencing in real time. So this funding did enable us to advance the cohort approach that I mentioned earlier, and this is a multi-tiered approach that engages communities in a couple of different ways. One is in the group setting of the cohort, through which we provide monthly webinars and we gather everyone into a similar virtual space to provide technical assistance on relevant topics that are guided by the Charging Smart framework that Ed walked you through. And we also have office hours where folks can come and ask questions about whatever topics they need help with at a given moment. We find that particularly useful in a group setting because folks can ask the technical assistance providers like the Great Plains Institute or IREC or other experts that we bring in questions, but they can also ask their peers. And that's a really powerful thing because they can talk about language that perhaps passed their board and how that might work in a peers similar decision making with a peers decision makers or local elected officials. So it becomes kind of a phone a friend network that you can engage with either in the office hours or offline. And those connections have been and continue to be really helpful to the communities that have been involved in our cohorts thus far. But we can't stop there. We also make the program tailored to the individual community's needs through some one-on-one meetings. We start off with a goal-setting meeting with each individual participant at the beginning of their engagement with Charging Smart, conduct regular check-ins, usually at least one at the midpoint of their engagement, but also throughout as they need it. And then also offer resources like in-depth assistance with zoning reviews, as Ed highlighted. That's a can be a key barrier for communities. So we want to make sure that we can give them that one-on-one engagement when they need it. So we bring together these group settings and the one-on-one support to offer the most comprehensive engagement possible to the communities. All of that is built on and around guides and templates that are provided through Charging Smart. Guides are kind of longer form. Templates are really immediately useful resources that are very short and sweet. For example, we have a template for how to stand up a page on a locality's website about electric vehicle charging and permitting needs. And we found that it's something communities use quite often. And we have several of the communities in Minnesota that have used the language to get information out to their citizens and residents. And of course, we explain how all of those resources work in our webinars, which again are monthly. And we also record them because communities have so many different hats and so many different obligations on their time that not everyone can attend live. And we want to make sure they can either return to a session they found particularly valuable or watch one when they weren't able to attend. And we do bring in a variety of different speakers from the Charging Smart team, and also outside of it, we often reach out to utilities that are engaged in the state or policymakers or other industry partners to provide the most up-to-date information to the participants. And that's another place where state level DOTs or other state departments can be very helpful in making sure in using these webinars to make sure that the communities have the most immediate information, particularly about policy decisions or funding opportunities. So what did all of this mean in Minnesota? With the support of the state DOT and the use of our cohort approach that balances the group and one-on-one support, we were able to operate a cohort or group of 30 communities, and 9 of them became the first in the nation to earn Charging Smart designation. I want to pause there for a minute to address the remainder of those communities and say that they also made significant progress towards transportation electrification throughout their involvement in Charging Smart, but maybe weren't ready to take 1 or 2 of the steps that are required to earn the bronze, silver, or gold designations that Ed explained earlier. But that's perfectly fine because we are able to allow communities to return to participate again in the program. And we're seeing that happen right now with some of these Minnesotan communities coming back because they found it valuable the first time and are ready to join us again. We also have a couple of the 9 communities that earn designation returning to participate. For example, if they earned bronze level designation, they're coming back to go for silver or even gold level in this time around, which is again been another key piece of information back to the state DOT to see which communities are engaging and how they might be able to bring in more projects in partnership with those localities. So this is just a photo from our in-person celebration of those communities that earned designation. It was really great to get everyone in the room and to have, again, the state there and IREC there to provide them the recognition that they truly deserve for their efforts. I also wanted to share a little bit more about the community's progress since they concluded their first round of engagement in Charging Smart. Of course, their efforts didn't stop at designation, and they continue to advance electrification. For example, one of our designees at the bronze level was Roseville, Minnesota, which is a small community. And they are now moving on to purchase, I believe it's the 2nd fully electric fire truck within the state. So that is a huge development that will hopefully be coming online for them in early 2025. We also have the community of Faribault, which earned bronze as well, and they are applying for several different state and federal funding opportunities to install charging infrastructure. I was able to give a presentation with one of their representatives at the APA Minnesota State Conference just a couple of weeks ago, and he really emphasized that some of the planning activities and resources that the Charging Smart program was able to provide help them create a firm foundation and vision for their electrification work that they're now utilizing to go into those funding sources and make those funding requests, both of the state and in partnership with the state. For example, they're hoping to expand their EV car share program, which is an exciting opportunity that exists in Minnesota and a couple of other Midwestern states as well. The final one I'll highlight here is La Crescent, which is a very small community, I think around 5,000 people. So which is great to see that communities of all sizes can be supported through Charging Smart. They earned silver in their very first attempt at participation, and they have since continued to experience a lot of success with implementing fully electric police patrol cars in their jurisdictions. And I believe their fleet assessment, I know Ed mentioned the importance of fleet assessments in achieving designation, I believe predicted a 93% reduction in carbon emissions through that new addition to their fleet. So we have here a series of communities that have successfully participated in our program, earned the designation regardless of the size of their communities, and they started all at different places in their electrification journey, but were able to benefit from the support of that state level funding through MDOT and the technical guidance of the Charging Smart program to earn recognition for great work they've already done, and then use that as a springboard to continue to reach even higher for their electrification goals. And we're excited to be working with at least 2 of these communities again through Charging Smart, which is, I think, a great reinforcement of how valuable they found the program to be. So that is the conclusion of my slides, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all may have. And I just want to say thank you again for having us here today.
Great. Thanks, Mackenzie, and thanks, Ed. Really awesome to hear about all the great work you all are doing in communities to enable EV charger expansion and EV adoption. So thank you for sharing all of that. Mackenzie, since I know you have to leave us in a few minutes, I will start off with a question, but in the meantime, everyone, feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box, and we will get to those. But my question is regarding some of the communities that were unable to achieve some of the Charging Smart designations. Are you able to share kind of what the main barriers for communities were to get that designation, and if there's anything state energy offices can do to really set those communities up for success in terms of EV readiness, and kind of getting, resources in front of them to kind of better integrate into the program?
Sure. Thank you, Delaney. That's a great question. Some of the communities that did not earn designation but still participated, I think two things I'll highlight here. One is the lead time that's necessary to update zoning codes and comprehensive plans can be a barrier for communities. And so if they're not in the cycle for the time of the update of their comprehensive plan, that can be challenging because the processes just take some time. To address that through Charging Smart, we're trying to ensure that the designation levels are appropriate or provide opportunities for communities that might not be ready to take those steps. Ed mentioned that we're not requiring zoning code revisions at the bronze level, for example. So we're trying to keep our program evolving over time to reflect the different statuses of communities as they get started. So that's one piece. Another piece that I'll say is a lot of the communities that were not able to earn designation are quite small or under-resourced in one way or another. And so if a state, I think there's many opportunities there for a state level organization to help those communities with standardization of programs or guidance that is specific to their local policy environment, because that changes across the country. Of course, Charging Smart does our best to provide resources that Ed and I both mentioned, and we try to adapt them to each state a unique situation. But if a state level organization can provide clarity or perhaps model ordinances and those kinds of things, it might make it a bit easier for the communities or other resources. It might make it a bit easier for the communities to move forward.
Great. Thanks, Mackenzie. That's really helpful. And anyone else, feel free to type in questions in the Q&A box. But I have another one while we wait. This one's about utility engagement. So wondering if Ed or Mackenzie, either of you are able to kind of share what role maybe a state energy office or other state agency could play to ensure utility coordination, utilities are appropriately engaged in these projects, and kind of any insight or lessons that you've learned regarding engaging utilities in the Charging Smart project so far.
You want to? Sure. So I'll kind of start off. We have a whole section for Charging Smart that is focused on utility engagement. So we put a lot of importance on it, and certainly we want the communication to be open between the locality and the utility. There are so many areas where the utilities, of course, interface with charging that it is very critical that line of communications be open. Of course, utilities can provide incentives, and they often do, for EV charging. The utilities can make it easier. They can do make-ready programs where they actually help build some of the infrastructure that's necessary to connect a charging location to the grid. And as we know, it is often very challenging to ask an apartment complex to spend money on a transformer so that they can put in some chargers for their residents. So where a utility can develop programs or be encouraged to develop programs to support some of that infrastructure, then it opens up a lot more opportunities for charging to get to everywhere, not only to homeowners, but to apartment dwellers. So there are a lot of opportunities. I'll just stop there, and maybe Mackenzie wants to add anything.
I'll just add two things. Ed did a great job there. The first is one of the pieces we've recommend for communities most often is to engage with your utility as early as possible, especially, somewhat regardless of the size of your project. And that could be, the project might be infrastructure installation, but it also might be expansion of your fleets. Both of those instances are times that you should get engaged with the utility as early as possible. So that's from the community side. And to your question, Delaney, about how can a state entity be involved in the relationship there, I think it's often helpful when a state has information about grid upgrades or grid capacity, so that those questions are much more easy for a community to answer. Do we have the ability to bring on these charging infrastructure or fleets if the state has done that at a larger level? We are then from the Charging Smart perspective, Ed mentioned we developed some resources on modeling and things to help answer those questions as well. But if the state has the existing information and can work with the utility at that level, it just makes it a little bit more clear and removes barriers for communities engaging at the more granular space.
Great, that's really helpful. Well, it looks like we don't have any other questions. So I want to thank you both for taking the time to share a bit about Charging Smart and all the great work you're doing. So thank you again. I will post these slides to NASEO's YouTube channel, so we'll send that out to all the registrants, and feel free to share with any of your colleagues that may have missed today's conversation. But thank you again, Ed and Mackenzie and everyone else for tuning in, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.